Hello boys and girls, so nice you could join me today. I have a story to share and I'm hoping that you will listen carefully to this story and remember how it goes and join in with the actions, and then you will be able to share the story and tell it to other people. Maybe even add your own little bits and pieces into it. And the story is about two characters. One called Mr. Wiggle, give your fingers a wiggle, and one called Mr. Waggle, give your fingers a waggle. Now, Mr. Wiggle and Mr. Waggle lived in identical houses. And when they went into their houses, they went inside like this, and they closed their doors. Now, one day, Mr. Wiggle decided it would be really nice to go and visit Mr. Waggle. So Mr. Wiggle opened his door, he went outside, he closed the door, and he got started on his journey. And Mr. Wiggle lived quite far away from Mr. Waggle. Just watch how he got there. He went up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill. It was a hard journey, and he knocked on Mr. Waggle's door. Oh dear, there was no answer. So he shouted, "Mr. Waggle!" No, still nobody there. So Mr. Wiggle had to go back up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill until he got back to his house, where he opened the door, he went inside and he shut the door. Now, the very next day, Mr. Waggle thought that he might quite like to visit Mr. Wiggle. So Mr. Waggle opened his door, he went outside, he shut his door, and he got ready for his big up and down journey. He went up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill until he got to Mr. Wiggle's house, and he knocked on Mr. Wiggle's door. No answer. Oh, Mr. Wiggle must have been sound asleep. And he shouted, "Mr. Wiggle!" Still no answer. He had to go all the way back home. He went up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill until he got back to his place, where he opened the door, he went inside, and he shut the door. Now, the very next day, these two friends both decided at exactly the same time that they were going to visit each other. So together they opened their doors, they went outside, they closed their doors, and they started off on their journeys, up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill, and halfway they met each other and they said, oh, they were so happy to see each other. You know what they did? They rolled down the hill and they ran back up. And then they rolled down the hill again and they ran back up. And then they chatted and they talked, for they hadn't seen each other in such a long time. They talked about all the things they'd been doing during lockdown and all these sorts of things. And then just before they left, they said, "Goodbye, Mr. Wiggle, goodbye, Mr. Waggle." And they waved to each other and they went back up the hills and down the hills and up the hills and down the hills and up the hills and down the hills, back home. And they opened their doors, they went inside, they closed their doors, and they had a nice long sleep after all that energy they'd been using. And the next time, if Mr. Wiggle and Mr. Waggle ever feel like visiting each other, you know what they're going to do? Yep, they're going to phone each other or text each other just to check that they are in I'm sure that some of you have been doing a lot of calls and video calls with friends and family just now, when we're not really allowed to visit each other. It's not so good, is it? But if you use this time, maybe, as I said, you can remember the story that we've just learned today, and you can share that with your family and your friends the next time you are on a video call. I hope you have fun doing that. Goodbye, boys and girls. See you next time.